welcome to Deep Sleep Storyteller. Tonight, the storm has found you, and so has the castle. And behind its ancient walls, the warmest, most beautiful room you have ever seen, you are going to sleep better than you have in a very long time. There is a particular kind of relief that exists only in contrast. The relief of warmth that you can only truly feel after cold. The relief of stillness that you can only truly feel after motion. The relief of shelter that you can only truly feel when the storm is still audible somewhere beyond the walls. When you can hear it but cannot be touched by it. When the rain and the wind and the dark are all still very much present in the world. But the world has placed between them and you a thickness of ancient stone and heavy oak and centuries of solid, reliable architecture that says, without any ambiguity whatsoever, that you are in here and the storm is out there, and those are two entirely different places, and you are in exactly the right one. We have been traveling for a very long time today. The roads through the Carpathian Mountains were long before the storm came, long and winding and steep, cut through forests of pine so dense and so dark that the afternoon light barely reached the road, even at its brightest, falling instead in angled shafts through the canopy that turned the forest floor into something from an old painting, something rich and shadowed and smelling of pine resin and cold earth, and the kind of mineral freshness that only exists at altitude in places that human civilization has touched only lightly. The road climbed and turned back on itself and climbed again, and the mountains were enormous on every side, their peaks lost in cloud even before the storm arrived, their slopes covered in that dark and ancient forest that seems in this part of the world to have existed since before memory, since before any of the stories that were ever told about it. And then the storm came. It came the way mountain storms come, which is to say quickly and completely, not with the gradual buildup that Flatland weather allows, not with the slow darkening and the warning of distant rumbling that gives you time to seek shelter or make preparations, but suddenly, or nearly suddenly, the sky darkening from pewter to charcoal to something that had no name in the color vocabulary of ordinary days. The first drops large and cold and deliberate on your face and hands, and then more of them, and then all of them at once. The rain arriving in its full force, as though it had been waiting just behind the mountain ridge for the exact right moment. And when it came, it brought the wind with it, and the wind brought the cold, and the cold was thorough and immediate, the kind of cold that finds its way through layers, that makes itself known in the bones before the skin has quite finished registering. You were cold and wet, and the road was becoming increasingly uncertain in the dark and the rain, and the forest on either side was immense and impenetrable and offered no shelter that would be any shelter at all. Then the road turned one final time, climbing steeply through a gap in the tree line, and there it was, the castle. You have been thinking about how to describe it ever since. But some things resist description the way certain dreams resist being told, the details all present and all true, and yet somehow the whole of it escaping the frame of any sentence, the whole of it being more than the sum of its parts in a way that only the experiencing of it can convey. It was enormous, that much was immediately certain, enormous in the way that only very old things built, by very serious people with access to unlimited stone and unlimited time can be enormous, not the gleaming height of a modern building, but the broad and settled enormity of something that has been exactly where it is for so long that it has become part of the mountain itself, has sunk its foundations into the rock so deeply that the boundary between architecture and geology is no longer entirely clear. Its towers rose into the storm dark sky, their pointed Gothic spires disappearing into the low clouds, and along its entire facade the rain was running in sheets down the ancient stone, catching the light from the windows, from those tall and narrow windows with their pointed arches and their colored glass, warm light pouring out through red and amber and deep jewel blue, warm light against the cold dark, an invitation so clear and so irresistible that your feet were already moving toward the great gate before your mind had finished deciding whether this was a good idea. The gate opened. The Count's staff, courteous and quiet, entirely competent, met you in the vast and echoing entrance hall and took your wet coat and your bags and told you, in accented but careful words, that the Count was away on a long journey of his own, but that he had sent word ahead that your arrival was expected and your comfort was its primary concern, and that the grand guest chamber on the upper floor had been prepared for you, the finest room in the castle, the room that the Count himself reserved for guests of particular importance, and that you should consider the castle entirely yours for the duration of your stay, and that everything you could possibly need had been arranged. You followed them up a staircase that was itself a work of art, its stone steps worn smooth by centuries of feet, its iron banister worked into the shapes of climbing vines and leaves, its walls lined with old paintings and dark frames that you did not look at too closely in the dim light, faces from another century regarding you with expressions that were not unfriendly, only serious, only the gravity of people who understood that time was long and the world was complicated, and that a painted face could afford to carry more weight than a living one. Up the staircase and along a corridor floored in dark polished wood that reflected the candlelight in long, wavering lines, past a series of doors that were closed and silent, past a tapestry that moved almost imperceptibly in some draft you could not identify, past the tall and narrow window through which you caught a brief and overwhelming glimpse of the mountains and the storm and the dark, the distance, and then to the door of the guest chamber. It is enormous. Of course it is. Everything in this castle is proportioned to a scale that makes ordinary furniture and ordinary rooms seem like toys. Seems like the scale a child uses when they are playing at building houses from whatever materials come to hand. This door is heavy oak, very dark, very old, its surface worn smooth in the center where generations of hands have pushed it, but retaining near the edges the complexity of the grain, the fine lines and variations of the wood's history readable in its surface the way the rings of a felled tree read its ears. It is bound in iron, bands of it crossing the wood at intervals, hand forged in some forge that may no longer exist, worked into shapes that are both functional and beautiful, the function and the beauty inseparable in a way that the best craftsmanship always makes them inseparable. There's a handle of iron, work smooth, shaped to fit a hand. You put your hand on it, you push, the door swings open with a weight and a deliberateness that immediately communicates something important, which is that this door, once closed, will keep whatever is inside inside, and whatever is outside outside. That this door is a boundary, a threshold, a declaration of two distinct categories of existence: the safe, warm, sheltered inside, and everything else. And that once you have crossed it and pulled it closed behind you, you will be entirely, completely, irrevocably in the first category, and entirely free from the second. You step through, and you pull the door closed behind you. The sound it makes as it closes is exactly the sound you needed to hear. It is not a slam, nothing so abrupt or alarming. It is a deep, resonant, satisfying thud, the kind of sound that only wood and iron of that age and weight and quality can produce. A sound that carries in its frequencies the entire history of the door. Every time it has closed in the centuries it has existed, every guest it has sheltered, every storm it has kept outside, every long and quiet night it has presided over, all of that history compressed into this one moment, this one thud, this one final and complete sound that says, you're in, you're safe. The storm is outside, you are in. The latch engages with a heavy, precise click, and then silence, or not silence exactly, because the room is far from silent, but the particular quality of sound that exists in a room that is so thoroughly sheltered from the outside world. The sounds of the outside world reach you only as a transformation of themselves, only as echoes and memories and muffled impressions, beautiful and reassuring precisely because of their distance, precisely because of what that distance represents. You can hear the rain. Of course you can hear the rain. The storm outside the castle is enormous and thorough, and entirely committed to its work, and its rain falls on the stone of the castle walls, the stone of the towers, and the stone of the courtyard below, and the stone of the mountain itself, with a continuous and comprehensive sound that is not one sound, but many, that has texture and depth and variation, that is the sound of water meeting stone, in every configuration that the castle's complex geometry allows, from the high, thin tapping of rain on the narrow glass of the pointed windows to the low, rushing sound of water running in sheets down the curved stone of the towers, to the more distant and more muffled rumble of the same rain falling on the forested slopes of the mountain beyond the walls. All of this is audible in the room, but it is audible in the way that music is audible from the next room over, or the way rain on a roof is audible when you are lying warm in bed beneath that roof, not as threat, not as intrusion, but as atmosphere, as the beautiful, soothing soundtrack to the interior experience of being sheltered, being warm, being in, being safe. And then you turn to look at the room itself, and for a moment you simply stand there, your hand still on the latch of the closed and heavy door, and you look, and the looking takes a long time, because there's so much to look at, so much beauty, so much warmth, so much that was clearly arranged by someone who understood that a weary traveler arriving in a mountain storm needed not merely a bed, but an experience of arrival, of belonging, of being expected and welcomed, and provided for with a generosity that went beyond the merely functional. The room is lit by fire. That is the first and most important thing, the thing that everything else is organized around and made possible by. The fireplace is enormous, set into the far wall, built of the same dark stone as the castle itself, but worked with more care than the outer walls. Carved, it's surrounded with figures that you cannot quite make out from here, but that suggest the organic shapes of nature, leaves and branches, and perhaps the suggestions of faces half hidden in foliage. The sort of carving that rewards extended looking without demanding it, that contains more detail the closer you come without ever becoming overwrought or excessive. And in the fireplace, a fire that the staff has clearly been building for some time before your arrival, a fire that has moved past the young and energetic stage of fresh, lit wood into the deep, settled, authoritative stage of a fire that knows what it is doing and has been doing it long enough to have fully committed to the business of producing heat and light without any remaining uncertainty about the process. The logs are large. They are old, dense hardwood, dark and gleaming where they have not yet caught, and brilliant where they have. Their surfaces fractured into glowing geometric patterns of deep orange and warm red, the colors of the deepest, most reliable kind of warmth, the colors that the human eye and the human body have understood as warm since the very beginning of the long relationship between fire and the people who live beside it. The flames themselves rise and fall, and rise again in the way that fire always moves, never still, never exactly the same from moment to moment, an improvisation within a structure, a variation within a theme, the theme being warmth and light, and the variations being every specific shape, height, and color that the flames take in their constant, mesmerizing motion. And the sound of the fire is the sound of wood doing what heated wood does. The low crackling, the occasional pop, the steady, and underneath all of it, the deep and continuous warm rush of combustion of the fire breathing in and out in its own enormous, patient, ancient way. The heat from the fireplace reaches you across the room. It reaches you as a physical thing, as something with presence and weight, a warmth that wraps around you the moment you step further into the room, that finds the places where the cold of the mountain road and the mountain storm still lingers in your clothes, in your hands, and your face, and begins, gently but thoroughly to address them. Your shoulders, which have been held against the cold in a way that was beginning to feel permanent, begin to drop. Your hands, which have been closed against the chill, begin to open. Your face, which has been braced, begins to ease. The room extends around the fireplace in both directions, and it is large enough that its furthest corners exist in a warm and beautiful dimness that the firelight does not fully reach, a dimness that is not dark in any alarming sense, but simply the natural shadow that exists in any large room lit primarily by fire, the gentle recession of illumination as you move away from the source, the room's edges softening into a rich amber brown, is as restful to the eye as any color has ever been. Candles supplement the firelight, placed in heavy iron holders at strategic points around the room, their flames protected by glass that catches and refracts their light into small, warm constellations on the nearest surfaces. There are perhaps a dozen of them in total, and together with the fire they fill the room with a quality of light that has no modern equivalent, a light that is entirely warm in its color temperature, that carries not a single trace of the blue-white frequencies that modern artificial light so often favors, a light that the human brain registers in the oldest, and most reliable part of its architecture, as safe as evening, as the appropriate time for rest. The walls of the room are paneled in dark wood to a height of perhaps 2/3 of their total height. A dark, almost black walnut that has been polished so thoroughly and over so long a period of time that it carries within its surface an internal depth of reflection, the way very old, very well-maintained wood does, as though the polish has sunk below the surface, and the surface is now reflecting not just the light that falls on it from outside, but some light that exists within the wood itself, some accumulated warmth from all the fires and all the candles that have burned in this room over all the centuries of its existence. Above the paneling, walls continue in plaster of a deep, warm cream that the firelight turns to amber and gold, and at intervals along the upper walls, there are sconces of worked iron holding candles whose light throws circular warmth on the plaster and on the dark pointed arches of the ceiling above. The ceiling. Look up for a moment at the ceiling of this room. It is vaulted in the Gothic style, which is to say that it rises to a ridge at the center along the length of the room, and is crossed at regular intervals by ribs of stone that spring from the tops of the walls and meet at the ridge in patterns that are both structurally essential and visually extraordinary. The ribs dividing the vault into a series of panels that the firelight fills with shifting warm shadow, making the ceiling seem to breathe, to move very slightly in the thermal convection that the fire creates, to have a kind of quiet life at the top of the room that is its own private and beautiful thing, existing just above the comfortable range of ordinary attention, requiring a particular kind of looking up to appreciate, the kind that only happens in rooms like this, in buildings like this, in moments like this, when there is nothing else required of you, and time has become, temporarily and blessedly, a thing with no urgency attached to it. The furnishings of the room are heavy and dark, and extraordinarily beautiful in the way of things that have been made by skilled hands for practical purposes, and have aged into a dignity that goes beyond their original practicality. There is a large table against one wall, its surface scattered with a few carefully chosen objects, a candlestick, a small dark vase holding a single dried flower, a book with a worn leather cover, a glass, and a decanter of something dark red that catches the firelight and glows with it. There are chairs of dark carved wood with cushions of deep crimson velvet, the velvet worn smooth in places but still rich, still carrying the depth and the luxury of its original quality, the color of it somewhere between the color of wine and the color of dried roses, a color that belongs to this room as completely as the stone and the wood and the firelight. There are shelves along the wall to the left of the fireplace, lined with books, very old books in dark bindings, their spines labeled in languages and scripts that you cannot fully read from here, but that nonetheless communicate the presence of accumulated knowledge, of thought and time preserved in a specific and irreplaceable way that books preserve them. There are curtains at the windows, and the windows, you will want to look at them properly in a moment, are tall and narrow, and pointed at the top in the Gothic arch and through their glass, which is colored, which is the deep, rich, complex glass of centuries-old craft. The storm outside is visible, transformed by its passage through the colored panes into something even more beautiful and even more distant than it already is. But the curtains that frame those windows are a thing unto themselves, and they deserve a moment of attention before the window itself. They are heavy velvet, the same dark crimson as the chair cushions, but in a larger and more imposing volume, falling from rings of iron on a rod close to the ceiling to pool very slightly on the stone floor below, and in the firelight. They are extraordinary, the texture of the velvet catching and releasing the light in a way that makes the surface of the curtains seem almost liquid, almost like the surface of dark water seen by candlelight, the color shifting from deep crimson to near black, and back to crimson again as the fire moves. They are partially drawn, these curtains, not fully closed across the windows, but pulled to either side, framing the glass the way a stage frame contains a performance, directing the attention toward what the window shows, without obscuring it, allowing the view and the light to coexist, allowing you to see the storm from inside the warmth without being in any way touched by the storm itself. Move toward the window, not hurry. There is no reason to hurry in this room. The room itself seems to breathe at a pace that discourages haste and makes hurry seem not just unnecessary, but vaguely inappropriate. The way hurrying in a cathedral seems inappropriate. The architecture itself communicating that this is a place with a different relationship to time than the one you carry in from the outside world. A place where minutes are longer, and the space between one moment and the next is wider and more generous, more full of whatever it is that moments are made of. Walk slowly toward the window, feeling the warmth of the fire on your back, and as you move toward it, and then stand before the glass, look through it at the world outside, the Carpathian night, the storm, the mountain. The glass is extraordinary. It is old, genuinely old, made by a process that no longer exists in exactly this form, and the oldness of it is present in every quality that distinguishes it from modern glass. It is not perfectly flat. It has a very slight, very gentle undulation to it, a variation in its thickness that catches the light differently at different points across its surface. It gives the view through it a very subtle, very beautiful distortion, not enough to obscure what lies beyond, but enough to transform it slightly, to give it the quality of a watercolor rather than a photograph, to add to the storm and the mountains and the dark a softness that makes them even more beautiful and even more removed from immediate reality than they would already be. The color of the glass adds to this, because the window is not entirely clear. It is composed of panels of colored glass worked together in a pattern that the candlelight inside and the storm lightning outside combine to illuminate different ways at different moments. The overall effect being that the view through this window is always, at every moment, a composition, a deliberate arrangement of color and light, and the shapes of the world beyond, given a new context by the medium through which it is seen, through the glass. The world is extraordinary. The rain is heavy and continuous, running down the outside of the window in sheets that catch what little light exists outside, and scatter it into thousands of small, moving points of brightness, rivulets and drops, and the complex patterns of water in motion over a surface, all of it moving constantly, all of it creating the visual equivalent of the sound of rain, which is to say a complex and layered pattern within which the eye finds constant variation, and within which, eventually, the eye finds rest, because the pattern is too complex to follow in its details. And what remains when you stop trying to follow the details is simply the overall impression of motion, of continuity, of the rain being what it is. Beyond the window, just outside the glass, there is a stone ledge, and on the corner of the ledge sits one of the castle's gargoyles. You can see it from here, its profile against the dark sky, its carved stone face turned outward toward the mountain with the patient, weathered expression of a thing that has been sitting in the rain for several hundred years and has developed a relationship with rain that is beyond inconvenience, beyond discomfort, beyond any category that applies to living things. Simply the stone being wet the way stone is wet. The rain running along the lines of the carving and off the edges of the wings that are folded against the gargoyle's sides. The water making temporary rivers of the carved grooves and channels that the original sculptor placed there centuries ago with exactly this purpose in mind, the purpose of carrying rainwater away from the castle's walls. The beautiful and the functional, again inseparable. The gargoyle's face is not frightening. You might expect it to be. You might have expected the whole of this castle and this night to carry a different quality, a darker and more alarming quality, because that is what stories have often made of places like this, of mountains like these, of nights like this one. But the gargoyle's face, seen through the old, slightly wavy glass of the pointed window and the shifting light of the storm and the warm glow that spills from the room behind you, has instead the quality of an old guardian, a presence that has been here for longer than you have been alive and will be here long after you are gone, watching the mountain with its stone eyes with a specific and extraordinary patience of carved stone, offering not threat, but a kind of companionship, a continuity, a reminder that this castle has sheltered many, many people from many, many storms, and that the gargoyle has witnessed all of them, has sat through every storm that has come across these mountains in every century since the castle was built, and that this storm, however comprehensive and however committed, is simply one more in a very long series, each one passing in time, each one giving way eventually to a morning, each one weathered by stone and wood and iron and fire into something that becomes, in memory, not ordeal, but experience. Behind the gargoyle and beyond the castle walls, the Carpathian Mountains are present in the dark and the rain, and the cloud felt rather than fully seen, their shapes suggested by the slightly different darkness of their slopes against the slightly lighter darkness of the storm sky. The tree line somewhere below and out there in the middle distance where the castle's courtyard walls give way to the natural slope of the mountain. The pine forest, beginning where the stone ends, continuing downward and outward, every direction into the dark. The pines are old and dense, and their smell, which you remember from the road, from the hours before the storm found you, was the smell of cold and resin and altitude, of air that has not been breathed many times before arriving at your lungs, of a landscape that is primarily itself and only incidentally visited by people. You cannot smell them from here, from inside the warm and fire-scented room, but you can imagine them out there, still smelling exactly as they smell, indifferent to the rain in the way that old pines are indifferent to rain, their canopies redirecting the water in their own complex patterns, the forest floor beneath them receiving whatever reaches it with the patient absorption of a landscape that has been doing this for a very long time. There is thunder. It comes in the distance, which is where mountain thunder often is, because mountain storms are large, and the thunder that belongs to them can be many miles away, even when the rain that belongs to the same storm is directly overhead. The sound traveling across the slopes and through the valleys and over the ridges in ways that the geography determines, arriving at your position transformed by its journey, softened and deepened by distance, a rumble rather than a crack, a continuous rolling sound rather than a sharp report. You feel it more than you hear it, or perhaps what you feel and what you hear are the same thing experienced through different sensory channels. The low frequency of the thunder traveling through the stone of the castle walls, and the stone of the floor, and the stone of the window ledge, and into the soles of your feet, and the palms of your hands. If they're touching any surface, a subsonic communication from the storm to the building, a conversation between weather and architecture conducted in the oldest language there is, the language of physical force meeting physical resistance. The castle absorbs it. The walls are very thick. You have learned this, traveling through the castle to reach this room. You have felt the thickness of the walls and the depth of the window recesses, in the distance between the inner surface of a wall and its outer face, a distance measured in feet of solid stone that was quarried and shaped and laid by hands that understood that in this climate, at this altitude, on this mountain, a wall that was going to keep the winter out and the warmth. It would need to be something that the climate took seriously. These walls take the thunder seriously. They receive it, they absorb it, they distribute the energy of it through their mass and their depth. And what arrives at the interior of the room where you're standing is only the echo of the sound, a resonance, a reminder that the storm is out there, a low and distant percussion that is, paradoxically, soothing precisely because of what it represents, which is the competence of the stone, the reliability of the shelter, the proof renewed with every rumble that the castle is doing its job, and doing it well. Turn away from the window now, not reluctantly. The window will still be there, and the storm will still be visible through it, and the gargoyle will still be sitting in the rain with its ancient stone patience, and the mountains will still be dark and enormous in the middle distance. All of that will be available to you for as long as you want it. But the room is pulling you back toward its center, toward its warmth, toward the fire that you can feel from here even at the window's distance, the warmth of it reaching across the room to remind you that it exists, that it is working, that it has been building and deepening its heat for hours, and has much more to offer. The fireplace is even more beautiful from this distance than it was close up. From the window you can take in the whole of it, the arch of dark carved stone above the hearth, the generous opening of the firebox within which the fire burns with such settled authority, the carved mantelpiece above it on which a few objects have been placed with the casual but deliberate artfulness of a hand that understood composition without needing to think about it consciously, a pair of heavy iron candlesticks, a dark clock with a face you cannot quite read from here, a small carved figure of something you cannot quite identify. The fire's light throws everything in the room into the warm relief of its particular illumination, and the shadows it creates on the walls and ceiling are alive in the way that fire shadows always are, moving slowly in response to every fluctuation of the flames, giving the room a quality of gentle, constant, very slow motion, as though the room itself is breathing, as though the warmth of the fire is the room's respiration, its slow, deep, even breath in and out. And now the bed. You have been aware of it since you entered the room, the way you are aware of large and important things even when you are not looking directly at them. The way of fire is always in the periphery of your awareness when you are in the same room as one. It stands against the wall to one side of the fireplace, positioned with great thought for warmth, close enough to benefit from the fire's heat throughout the night, far enough that the heat is gentle rather than overwhelming, an arrangement that required someone who understood both fires and sleeping people and the optimal relationship between the two. It is a four-poster bed. Four posts rise to a height that requires looking up to see their tops. Carved columns of very dark wood, each one worked with the same organic motifs as the fireplace surround, leaves and vines, and the half-suggested shapes of things that might be faces, or might simply be the imagination, finding what it looks for in the complex patterns of old carving. At the top, the posts support a canopy of the same crimson velvet as the curtains and the chair cushions, a canopy that hangs at each corner in heavy, pleated folds, and creates above the bed a roof of its own, a smaller and more intimate sky of deep dark red that would, if you were lying in the bed looking up, contain everything, the entire visual world reduced to that warm, closed canopy and the warm, closed dark between it and your face. The bed is made with the kind of care that suggests the person who made it understood that the making of a bed for a weary traveler is not a chore, but a form of hospitality, a form of kindness, a physical expression of welcome and care. The sheets, visible at the top of the bed where they are folded back in invitation, are very white against the darker surroundings, a bright mist that speaks of cleanliness and freshness, and the care of linen that has been washed and dried and ironed with attention. Over the sheets, layered in the order that centuries of experience have determined to be optimal, are blankets of increasing weight and warmth. The first a fine wool of dark green, the second a heavier blanket in the same deep crimson as the room's other fabrics, and over all of this a quilt, an extraordinary quilt, thick and heavy and filled with something so thoroughly insulating that it seems to have warmth stored within it beyond what the fire alone could account for. The kind of quilt that when you pull it over yourself does not simply cover you, but claims you, envelops you, makes of itself a microclimate around your body that is independent of the larger room's temperature, its own small and perfect world of warmth. The pillows, there are several, arranged at the head of the bed with the same thoughtful generosity that characterizes everything in this room. Large pillows and smaller pillows, pillows that are firm and pillows that are soft, and the pillowcases that cover them match the sheets in their whiteness and their freshness. And when you press your hand into the nearest one, you are close to the bed now. You have crossed the room without quite deciding to, drawn by the warmth and the beauty and the promise of the quilt. When you press your hand into the nearest pillow, it gives, then gently returns, holds the impression of your hand for a moment, and then slowly slowly recovers its shape, an action so simple, so physical, and so quietly perfect that it produces in you a small and involuntary sigh, the sigh of the body saying yes to something it has been waiting for without knowing it was waiting. The fire is so warm from here. From here, standing beside the bed, you are close enough to the fireplace that the warmth of it is not just something you feel on your face and hands, but something you feel in your chest, in the way that the air you breathe has been heated by the fire and carries the warmth into your lungs with every slow breath. Warm air going in and warming everything it touches. Warm air going out, carrying away the last of the cold, the last of the damp, the last of the long road and the mountain storm. You breathe it in again, deliberately this time, slowly, filling your lungs completely with the warm, slightly smoky, wood-scented air of this room, holding it there for a moment, at the top of the breath, feeling the warmth spreading outward from your lungs through your whole body, and then letting it go, slowly all the way out, your shoulders dropping slightly with the exhale, your face softening slightly with the exhale, your whole body settling very slightly downward with the exhale, in the way that bodies settle when they are given permission to stop holding themselves up. You are going to get into the bed now. There is nothing more to prepare, nothing more to consider, nothing more to arrange or decide or do. The room is warm. The storm is outside. The door is closed and latched. The fire has many hours of burning left in it. The candles have been placed with the kind of care that suggests they will burn through the night without any attention from you, replacing themselves in their holders as they burn down, maintained by the same quiet attentiveness that arranged everything else in this room. The staff of the castle, whoever they are, wherever they are at this hour in this great and ancient building, have done everything that needed doing. Everything has been attended to. Everything has been arranged. The only thing left is for you to accept what has been offered, to receive the hospitality of the bed, the fire, and the storm's beautiful distance with the same graciousness with which it has been given. You pull back the quilt and the blankets beneath it, and then the sheets, creating a layered opening in the made bed that is exactly the right size for a person, your size, your shape, the size and shape of a weary traveler who has come a long way and arrived in a storm and is now, at last, at the end of the road, at the destination, at the place that was waiting and has proven beyond any expectation to be worth waiting for. The sheets receive you. That is how it feels. Not that you get into the sheets, but that the sheets receive you, the way a lake receives the diver, the way warm water receives the hand that tests it before the bath, the way any welcoming thing receives the thing it was made to welcome. The cool of the linen against your skin resolves very quickly into warmth, into the warmth of your own body returned to you by the fabric, and then the blankets settle over you, and then the extraordinary quilt, and the weight of it is perfect, not so heavy that it constrains, but heavy enough to be felt completely, heavy enough to register in every part of the body that it covers as a comprehensive, encompassing, total warmth, a warmth that says, you do not need to hold yourself against anything anymore. The quilt is holding you. You can stop. You can stop. The pillow receives your head with the same accommodating softness, that your hand found a moment ago when you pressed into it, and your head sinks into it, finding its angle, finding the precise degree of tilt that the neck has been wanting for hours without being able to find it. And there's a moment of perfect alignment, skull and spine, pillow, all agreeing on the same position, and the relief of that agreement is enormous, quiet, and entirely physical. The relief of the skeleton allowed to rest, of the muscles of the neck allowed to release the work they have been doing all day. You look up at the canopy of the bed, the crimson velvet ceiling of your small and perfect world. It moves very slightly in the warmth that rises from your body and from the room, a barely perceptible trembling of the heavy fabric, a movement so slow and so subtle that it is more sense than seen, and it is beautiful. That slight movement, it gives the canopy the quality of something living, something breathing, something that is sharing this space with you in a way that is companionable and warm and entirely benign. The fire crackles. You hear it differently from here, from the horizontal, from inside the warmth of the bed. From here, the crackle of the fire is a comfortable remove, not close enough to be stimulating, but close enough to be clear, clear enough to follow, to hear the individual sounds within the general sound, the pop of a pocket of sap, and the wood releasing its pressure, the low hiss of the draft in the chimney, drawing the smoke upward, the intermittent fall of a fragment of burning wood settling further into the coal, and beneath all of these more specific sounds, the continuous warm rush of combustion, the fire's breathing, the fire's heartbeat, the fire doing its ancient and reliable work, and the rain on the windows, on the stone, on the courtyard below, on the roofs and the towers, and the gargoyles, and the slopes of the mountain beyond. From here in the bed, with the quilt around you, and the canopy above you, the rain is even more remote than it was at the window, more thoroughly transformed by distance and stone and warm air into something purely musical, purely atmospheric, a continuous, complex sound that the mind can follow or not follow as it chooses, that provides enough sonic texture to prevent the particular restlessness of absolute silence while being entirely without information that requires a response, entirely without urgency, entirely without anything except itself, which is to say, the sound of water falling on stone in the night. The thunder comes again, somewhere in the middle distance of the mountains, a low and rolling rumble that travels through the castle walls in subsonic register and arrives in the bed as the faintest vibration, felt rather than heard, and it lasts for several seconds. This particular rumble, longer than most, traveling along the mountain flanks in a way that suggests the storm is very large, and the mountains are creating interesting acoustics for it, bouncing the sound between ridges and valleys in a way that extends the duration of each thunder roll to something longer and more complex than it began as. Then it fades, gradually, over the course of a few slow seconds, the last traces of it blending back into the sound of the rain and the fire until you cannot be entirely certain where the thunder ended and the other sounds resumed. You breathe. The warmth of the bed is complete now, not still building, but arrived, the space between your body and the quilt having reached the temperature that the body and the bedding together produce. when the bedding is as good as this bedding is, and the room is as warm as this room is. You're in a pocket of warmth that is yours specifically, shaped by you and held by the bedding. A warmth that is personal and private and total. Your legs, which have been walking all day, are heavy in the bed. Not painfully heavy, not the heaviness of injury or illness, but the satisfying heaviness of muscles that have worked hard and are now being given the rest they earn. The heaviness that is actually the feeling of tension releasing, of the long day's physical effort finally being acknowledged and released and allowed to dissolve into the warmth of the mattress beneath you. Your legs are growing heavier. Let them be heavier. The bed holds them. They do not need to hold themselves up. They have done everything that was asked of them today, and they are done now. Released from service, allowed to be simply heavy and warm and still. Your arms are the same. Let them be heavy. Let your hands open, the way they are opening now without any instruction. The fingers uncurling from the slight tension that hands carry through the day, opening slowly, naturally, the palms turning very slightly upward in the way that relaxed hands naturally lie, open and unguarded and entirely at rest. Your back has found the mattress. This is worth noting. The way the back finds the mattress, rather than the mattress merely supporting the back. The way a good mattress and a rested body meet each other as equals. The body discovering in the mattress's surface a geography that matches its own. A slight give here, and a firmer support there, and a general yielding that distributes the weight of the body across its entire surface, so that no single point bears more than its natural share. Your back has found this mattress, and the mattress has found your back, and the two of them are already engaged in the quiet and mutually beneficial negotiation of a long night's rest. Grandfather clock. You hear it now, faintly, from somewhere beyond the closed door of the room, from the grand hallway that this room opens onto, where it stands presumably in some tall and dark and beautifully carved case, keeping the time of the castle with the same patient precision as kept for however many generations it has existed. Its voice comes to you through the heavy oak door as a faint but clear tick, not the sharp mechanical tick of a modern timepiece, but the deeper, more resonant, more deliberate tick of an old weight-driven movement. Each tick and each talk a separate and complete event, each one marking the passage of a second with a gravity and an intention that modern timekeeping has largely abandoned. Each one saying, in its way, that time is passing, and that the passing of time is something worth noting, something worth marking, something that deserves a sound. Tick, and then talk, and then tick. And between each tick and each talk, a moment of silence that is not emptiness, but presence. The moment the clock is preparing its next marking, the moment that exists between 1 second and the next, the gap that is always there in time, but that we only hear when something like this old clock makes the structure of time audible by marking its boundaries. Tick, tock, the sound of it from this distance, from inside the warmth of this bed, through the heavy door, is exactly the right sound for this hour and this place. It gives the night a rhythm, a slow and reliable rhythm, a rhythm so much slower than the heartbeat, so much slower than the breath, so much slower than any of the body's own rhythms, that it serves as a kind of anchor for those rhythms, a reference point against which the body's own slowing pace can be measured and appreciated, a confirmation that time is moving, and that its movement is ordinary and expected and fine. Tick tock, the fire crackles, the rain falls on the stone. Thunder, when it comes, is more distant now than it was before. The storm moving along the mountain range in the direction that mountain storms tend to move. The center of the electricity and the heavy rainfall traveling over the ridge and down into the next valley, leaving in its wake a rain that is still steady and still comprehensive, but marginally less intense than it was at its height. The kind of rain that will last for hours. That is the rain of a well-established and committed weather system. Rather than the dramatic peak of a storm's arrival, the rain that falls with patience rather than urgency, with the long, continuous, reliable sound of something that has settled in for the night. Would let it rain. Let it rain on the stone and the gargoyles and the pine forests and the mountain roads and the valley below. Let it fill the streams and run down the slopes and collect in the ancient gutters of the castle's drainage system and fall from the eaves in thin, continuous streams that have been falling from these same eaves in every mountain storm for hundreds of years. Let the rain do what rain does out there in the dark, in the cold, on the stone and the wood, the earth of the mountain, while in here, behind the walls and the door and the warmth of the fire, you do what you do, which is breathe, grow heavier, and let your mind do the quiet, loosening thing it does at the edge of sleep, the thing where thoughts stop being sentences and become instead just presences, shapes in the warm dark of the mind, not requiring attention or response. Your breathing is slower now. It's been slowing since you got into the bed, since the warmth claimed you, since the weight of the quilt told your body that it could stop working, and the slowing has continued without any effort on your part. The way things settle when they're allowed to settle, the way water finds its level, the way a pendulum finds its pace. Your breathing now is long and even, in through the nose, the warm, wood smoke scented air of the room, and out through the nose or the slightly parted mouth, slowly, completely, without any sense of effort or management, simply the body breathing, because it knows how, because it has always known how, because the body is very good at the things it does automatically. Breathing is one of the things it does best when left alone to do it. Breathe in, long and slow. Let your chest rise. Let your ribs expand. Let your belly soften outward with the fullness of the breath. Warm air moving all the way in, filling you. And now, long and slow, let the air go completely. Let the chest fall. Let the ribs come together. Let the belly return, the body emptying itself of what it has used and making room for the next breath, the next long, slow, warm, wood-scented breath in this warm and ancient and beautiful room on this mountain in this storm. The candles nearest to you, the ones on the little table beside the bed, are burning with a steadiness that speaks of stillness. No significant draft reaching them here. Their flames perfectly vertical and perfectly consistent, burning with the clean, even quality of a flame that is using its fuel exactly as fuel is meant to be used, without waste, without drama, with the same patient authority as the larger fire in the heart. Their light on the ceiling of the bed's canopy creates a warm, soft amber glow that is the last thing your eyes hold before they close, the last image that you carry with you into the dark behind your eyelids. This warm amber dome above you, this small, perfect ceiling of your warm and perfect world. Your eyes close. They close because they want to close, because the weight of them has been increasing since you lay down in the same way that the weight of your limbs has been increasing. And the closing of the eyes is simply that weight finding its natural resolution, the eyelids descending with a slow and final quality of curtains closing at the end of a performance, not abruptly, not dramatically, but with the complete and unhurried certainty of something that was always going to happen and has now simply arrived at its moment. The room is still there. Behind your eyelids, the warm amber light of the fire and the candles is still present as a quality, a warmth of illumination that the closed eyelids do not entirely block, but transform, as the old glass of the window transforms the view through it into something slightly softer and more diffuse. The edges of the light blurred and generalized into a warm, glowing impression. That is the room's light as your closed eyes receive it, reddish and warm and constant. The fire's fluctuations translated through the eyelids into a very gentle, very slow pulsing that is almost like breathing that finds. In the way that rhythmic things find each other, the rhythm of your own breathing settles alongside it. The storm is out there. The mountains are out there, enormous and dark and covered in old pine forests, their slopes running with rain, their peaks in cloud, their valleys filling with the runoff of the storm that has been building all day and is now doing its work with a thorough and personal efficiency of weather at its most committed. Out there, the roads are wet and empty. The trees are bending very slightly in the wind that comes with the rain. The gargoyle on the window ledge is sitting in the dark with its stone patience, its carved wings folded, its ancient face turned toward the mountain, watching with its stone eyes the weather that it has watched for all the centuries of its existence, unmoved, unchanged, doing its job, which is simply to be there, simply to endure, simply to sit in the rain and the cold and the dark of the mountain and be the castle's guardian, the castle's witness, the castle's oldest and most reliable presence. But you are not out there. You are in here. You are in the warm. You are in the bed. You are under the quilt with the velvet canopy above you and the fire crackle and the rain and the faint, distant ticking of the grandfather clock beyond the door, all combining into a sound that is not music, not silence, but something between and beyond both, the sound of shelter, the sound of being thoroughly, completely, irrevocably inside, the sound of everything outside being safely, beautifully, reassuringly outside. Let that settle over you completely. Let the knowledge of your safety become something you feel in the body, not just something you know in the mind. Feel the walls of the castle, the immense and patient thickness of them between you and the storm. Feel the warmth of the fire, the accumulated heat of hours of burning in the air around you, and the slight additional warmth at the foot of the bed where the fire's heat reaches most directly. Feel the weight of the quilt, comprehensive and personal, specific to you and to this moment, and to the particular arrangement of your body. in this particular position, in this particular bed. Feel the pillow under your head, the exact and perfect softness of it, the way it holds the weight of your head completely so that the muscles of your neck can stop, can fully release, can be as quiet and as still as the rest of you is becoming. Your mind is quieting. This is what happens. What always happens when the body is comfortable enough and warm enough and safe enough and still enough for long enough. The mind, which has been busily conducting the business of the day, processing the road and the storm and the arrival and the castle and all the new sensory information of this extraordinary place, begins to slow, begins to let the individual threads of thought become less taut, less insistent, less like things that need to be followed to their conclusions, and more like loose and meandering suggestions, associations that arise without urgency and dissolve without loss, images rather than sentences, impressions rather than arguments, the soft and non-committal mental activity of a mind that is relinquishing its grip on wakefulness and allowing itself to drift toward the border territories of sleep. You might think of the road, the long road through the pine forest, the smell of it, the cold and the resin and the altitude. You might think of the trees. You might think of the moment the castle appeared around the bend, the warm light through the colored glass windows against the storm dark sky. These thoughts arise and pass without requiring anything from you, without demanding that you follow them or complete them or do anything about them at all. They are simply there for a moment, complete and vivid in whatever way memories and impressions are vivid at the edge of sleep, and then they dissolve back into the warm dark of the mind, making room for whatever comes next, or for nothing at all, for the clean, welcoming blankness that is the beginning of true sleep. The fire will burn through the night. The logs that have been placed in the hearth are large and dense, and have been arranged with the specific intention of burning for many hours, arranged by someone who understood the fire as well as they understood the room, and who knew that a sleeping guest should not wake in the cold, that the fire's job is not to burn brilliantly for an hour and then die, but to burn steadily and deeply for as long as the night requires, giving its warmth patiently and continuously until the morning comes and the light changes and the purpose of warmth in the room shifts from the warmth of shelter to the warmth of a new day beginning. The fire knows this, or the fire behaves as though it knows this, which is the same thing in practice. The logs giving themselves to combustion at exactly the pace that combustion requires, and the air, the draft allow, the coals beneath the active burning building up over the hours into a deep, glowing bed of embers that will sustain the fire long after the last active flame has died down, the heat in those coals radiating into the room with a gentleness and evenness that is the particular gift of well-established embers, a warmth that is less dramatic than flame, but more reliable, more steady, more completely at peace with itself and its purpose. Tick tock, the grandfather clock in the hallway marks the seconds. Tick tock, each one exactly like the last, each one exactly like the next. The pendulum swings, and the escapement releases, and the hands move, and the seconds pass, and the night deepens, and you breathe, and the fire burns, and the rain falls, and the thunder When it comes from further and further away as the storm moves along the mountain range and gradually, over the course of the night, loses its intensity, the lightning becoming less frequent, the thunder becoming more distant, the rain becoming quieter, the whole enormous weather event slowly winding down from the height of its arrival toward the long and quiet residual rain that will still be falling when morning comes, but will by then be more like a memory of the storm than the storm itself, gentle and consistent and almost companionable. But that is later. Right now, the rain is still full and the thunder is still present in the distance, and the fire is still at the bright and active stage of its long night's burning. And in the bed, in the warmth, under the quilt, your breathing is slow, and your eyes are closed, your mind is very quiet. The border of sleep is very close, that border that has no physical marker, no line that you cross and then are past, but that announces itself instead as a gradual change in the quality of consciousness, a softening of the boundary between self and the surroundings, a loosening of the sense of precise location and precise time, a gentle dissolution of the edges of things into a warmth that is both interior and exterior, both the warmth of the room and the warmth of the particular territory that sleep inhabits, the warmth that is the body's own deep temperature, the warmth that is always there, and that wakened consciousness keeps at a slight remove, and that sleep allows you to sink back into completely. Sink into it. There is nothing to resist it. There is no reason, none at all, to stay at the surface of wakefulness when the warmth and the dark and the sound of rain and the crackle of fire and the slow tick of the clock and the heavy and beloved weight of the quilt are all conspiring so gently, so patiently, so completely on the side of sleep, all of them saying in their different ways and their different languages that you have arrived, that you are safe, that the night is long and full of rest, that the castle has sheltered many weary travelers before you, and that its stones, and its walls, and its fire, and its heavy doors that never, in all the centuries of its existence, failed to provide exactly what was needed, which is this: warmth, safety, stillness, the absolute, complete absence of anything that needs to be done. Nothing needs to be done. Everything has been done. Everything that needs doing has already been done by the road and the arrival, the door closing, and the bed accepting you, and the quilt settling over you, and the fire burning, and the rain falling, and all the thousand small and necessary acts of the day that brought you here to this precise moment, in this precise place, and all of it was enough. All of it was exactly what was needed. And now the only thing left is to let the night do what nights are for. The fire crackles, softly, deeply. The sound of it is so familiar now, so thoroughly incorporated into the soundscape of the room, that it has become less like a sound you hear and more like a quality of the air itself. A warmth that is audible, a light that is audible, a continuous and gentle presence at the edge of your awareness that requires nothing and offers everything. The rain falls on the stone. It falls the way. It will fall all night, steady and thorough, and without any intention of stopping, the Carpathian night entirely committed to the business of the storm, the moisture coming in off whatever large body of water feeds these mountainous weather systems, and traveling over the landscape and releasing itself as rain against hits the stone of the castle with a sound that has no words, but has a quality, a richness, a depth of texture that comes from water meeting very old stone in the middle of the night on top of a very high mountain in a very large and ancient range. A sound that belongs specifically to this place and this night and nowhere and nothing else. A sound that could not exist anywhere but here. And you're here, you are. You are as much a part of this night, this place, as the fire and the rain and the gargoyle on the window ledge and the old clock in the hallway and the dark pine forest on the mountain slopes beyond the castle walls. You were a traveler who arrived in a storm and found shelter, and was given warm and a bed, and the crackling of a fire, and the sound of rain on ancient stone. And you have accepted all of it with the gratitude of a body that needed exactly this and found it. And now you are part of the night's composition, one element in a rich and quiet arrangement of this particular night in this particular place, resting and breathing and warm and safe and held. Held. That is the word. You are held. The bed holds you. The quilt holds you. The room holds you. The castle holds you within its ancient and immovable walls. The mountain holds the castle, and somewhere, at a scale far beyond anything you need to think about, something holds the mountain and the storm and the pine forest and the gargoyle, the tick of the clock and the crackle of the fire and the sound of your breathing all together in the same extraordinary night, holds all of it with the same comprehensive and effortless care with which the quilt holds you, with the same warmth and the same weight and the same complete and total adequacy. You're held, you're safe, and the night is very long, very full of rest. Your breathing is so slow now, so very slow, gently, without effort, and out, gently, without effort. The mind has gone very quiet. There are no sentences left in it. There are no decisions to be made or plans to be considered or memories to be reviewed or worries to be addressed. There is only the warmth and the sound of the rain and the sound of the fire and the very faint and very distant tick of the clock and the even more faint and more distant rumble of the thunder moving away along the mountain range, and the quality of the dark behind your closed eyelids, which is warm and amber and completely, perfectly restful. Something in you is settling, the last thing, the deepest thing, the part of you that does not relax easily, that holds on longer than the muscles and the thoughts and the breath, the part that is most vigilant and most guarded, and most accustomed to remaining alert even when the rest of you has been given permission to rest. That part is settling now, is releasing, is finding in the warmth and the sound and the complete and thorough safety of this room in this castle, on this mountain, on this stormy night, whatever it needed to find in order to let go. Let it let go, let it release. There is nothing it needs to guard against here. The castle has stood for centuries. Its walls have kept out everything that walls can keep out. Every cold wind, every heavy rain, and every dark night the mountains have ever produced. And they are keeping out all of those things right now, as thoroughly and as reliably as they have always done. And the fire is burning, and the quilt is warm, and the door is closed, and the clock is ticking, and the rain is falling, and everything is exactly as it should be. There is a moment. It is very close now. The moment that is not waking and not sleeping, but the perfect place between them, the warm and held and resting place where you are still aware of the rain and the fire and the warmth and the dark. But awareness has become something very loose and very gentle. Has become something that does not grip or focus, but simply receives. Simply allows the sounds and the warmth and the sensations of the room to be present without doing anything with them, without analyzing or cataloging or remembering, just letting them exist in the same space as your very quiet consciousness, just being together, the room, you, in the warm and the dark and the rain. That moment, you are in it. Breathe. Just breathe. The fire will keep you warm. The walls will keep you safe. The rain will keep the world outside exactly where it belongs. And the night will keep you here in this warm and ancient and beautiful room for as long as you need, for all the hours between now and morning, for every slow and restful breath between the closing of your eyes and the gentle return of the light. Sleep now. Just sleep. The clock is ticking in the hallway. Tick. Oh, the fire is burning in the hearth. The rain is falling on the stone. The mountains are dark and enormous outside the castle walls. And you are in here, warm, safe, held, breathing, drifting. The storm will pass. It always does. But you will sleep through all of it. Every hour of rain and distant thunder and wind along the mountain ridge. Every crackle of the fire settling into its deep and glowing embers. Every tick of the old clock marking the slow and generous passage of the night. Every drop of rain on the ancient gargoyles and stone face. Every whisper of the pine forest on the slopes below. Every breath of the mountain's cold and enormous patience. Through all of it you will sleep, deeply and completely, and without interruption, held in the warmth of the grandest room, in the oldest castle, on the darkest mountain. A guest who was expected, who was welcomed, who was given everything that a weary traveler could ever need. The rain falls, the fire breathes, the clock marks the seconds, and you breathe, and you rest, and you sleep. The storm will last all night, and so will the fire, and so will the warmth.